Hello, everyone. Welcome back or welcome into our fourth and final video, at least in this installment of how-to videos for UpStream. I'm Jake Dunn with CGF Architects, one of the UpStream developers. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Go ahead and share my screen because today we're going to be talking about force factors. And this is the diagram that sort of shows the advancements that we were trying to contribute to with this tool and sort of where we've been before with these videos, right? So first video was overview of the tool. Our second video was looking at all of the different LCA modules going from kind of beginning to end, looking at those different biogenic starting points and end of life baseline scenario assumptions. Our latest video was on looking at the custom end of life scenarios with our two different data sets and how to build those based upon other assumptions or desires for end of life distributions. And then today we're going to be talking a little bit about adding the forest into this whole piece, which is sort of where we started with this whole process. So let me sort of jump down a bit to talk a little bit about what the plan is for this particular piece. And actually, to do that first, let me just go ahead and jump into the spreadsheet here. Remember, I always like to create two different windows so we can look at both the outputs and the inputs on the same screen. And let's see, yeah, this looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom in a little bit there. I'm going to change this to 70, works pretty good for my screen. Okay, and there we go. So here we have our full building LCA, cradle to grave, all our different modules. Looks like we're still using one of the custom end of life scenarios just based upon the shape of that data. And then we're going to scroll down to step 7, calculating module A0 impacts from forestry. And so, we give this sort of flag here about going outside of some of the ISO approved LCA methodologies and cradle to gate analyses, because this isn't actually sanctioned by any of these particular standards as well. So to accommodate that, we're sort of reporting things separately and not having it account for the net. And currently, what we have here is just one way to simulate these force factors, sort of as a proof of concept. We have this custom dropdown, which allows you to put in sort of a custom value as long as in this particular format, kilograms of CO2 E per meters cubed of industrial round wood. So in this case, we can input that number in based upon other research that's out there, and it automatically adds it to this particular chart. It's not impacting the overall net. It's sort of being included as a separate sequestration benefit, looking up at the landscape level. And we're revisiting sort of how to deal with A0 in general. This is a proof of concept on how it can be added in. Once we sort of bake into some of these other data sets, this factor will be able to select different forestry factor data sources, whether it's coming from, folks like EcoTrust that are actively doing this kind of research, or even some of the certification bodies like FSC and SFI. We'll hopefully be able to have feature-rich dropdowns that allow us to navigate their data sets to apply them based on various assumptions. And it's great we can announce that we were selected for Carbon Leadership Forum incubation, which is going to give us the ability to actually review some of our force factor data sets and methodologies that we have built into the tool, but not built into the release of this version. And just a brief background on that. The kind of first order of business once we get into incubation will be to vet the methodologies around what EcoTrust has produced. Looking back at their kind of initial paper that they did a couple of years ago, which looked at basically using carbon offset accounting to try to attribute landscape level carbon benefits to timber products. And then there's sort of two versions that have been derived from that, both the simulated net ecosystem carbon balance, which more narrowly focused on carbon stock change and left the rest of the LCA, biogenic carbon in the products end of life, to EPDs and LCA. So it was a better way to kind of fit those two together. And this simulated data set allows you to look at kind of two different state scenarios and FSC versus non-FSC and two different rotational periods. And that's basically the simulated set. And then there's sort of a newer data set, which is this observational satellite biomass data, which looks at one of the NASA carbon satellite databases that can actually track actual carbon stock change using the biomass satellite imaging data sets that are for a certain period of time. And this can be broken down sort of by landowner type and at the county level or state level, or potentially even landowner level. So this is really what we're engaging with the Carbon Leadership Forum, is to understand, how to use those data sets and how to make sure that the data is representational based upon, looking at certification binaries in some cases, if we're looking at the simulated data sets, or if we're able to actually track our wood back to the origin or have some sense of where it's coming from at either the kind of mill woodshed or specifically, using methods like segregation, then we can get to a more specific carbon value. And we have the county level data currently. We're sort of like trying to understand how to deal with some of the data analytics, and then also the protocols for what temporal and spatial scale that you use based upon the data that we have currently. So all that's really exciting. We're close to being able to kind of vet through it and have something that's a little bit more robust to be included in the tool. Hopefully that will get included in sort of future versions of UpStream. So right now we just have the kind of custom input currently to kind of show how that might get spliced in, and then hopefully future versions will have the full data sets depending on how incubation goes. The other thing that is interesting is that if you want to learn a little bit more about the methodology behind A0 and why it's important to include, right, we can sort of search for that particular input, and then we're at our step 7, calculate modules A0. And this gives sort of an overview of sort of how the forest is being included or not included in sort of the current ISO standard LCA methodologies. Sort of have a quote from the AWC EPDs talking about like why forest management needs to be addressed, and sort of what's at stake basically, and how to do that. So this is some good background to basically where we can sort of move away from the carbon neutrality assumption of looking at North America as a whole and trying to get into a more accurate assessment on sort of a forest by forest or county by county or a landowner by landowner level, so we can account for some of the benefits of wood that aren't being accounted for, or to more fairly account for some of the burdens that also might not be accounted for depending upon where that comes from. So I think it's really exciting to be pushing this forward, or providing a way for all the research to come into a tool and be analyzed in kind of wood LCA. And like I said, we're going to be taking these factors from basically all the different research institutions as they come out. EcoTrust, FSC is actively looking at this, SFI, and sort of anything else out there that comes about. We hope for this to be sort of a common collecting ground to evaluate and to test these particular types of forest factors and advance that conversation forward. So right now we've got the custom input, and we'll have to stay tuned for the full sets as they go out. We'll be kind of making those announcements. So with that, I think, that wraps up this initial set of training videos on the how-to. And just a reminder is that you can always email us at upstream.forestrylca@gmail.com with any questions or pilot feedback, or if you'd like to be updated if new releases come out, or once we start to get those force factors built into the tool. So with that, thanks everybody for listening, and yeah, we're excited for folks to be able to give it a spin and give us some feedback. Thanks.